Thanks for watching or listening to this episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. This month, we're doing something a little different as our church is in a season that we're referring to as really a series and some Wednesday night online content. We're also taking part in a devotional with this theme of the Happy Remnant. And we are discussing the idea that often what God will do is use suffering or trials or struggles to purify his people, to test our faith. And so today, we were just joined a night or two ago at the time of, maybe you're watching now or listening now, by my good buddy Jason Hayes.
Are we allowed to do a high five right now, or we'll just do it like an air five?
We'll do an air five.
Yeah,
that's fine.
It's a COVID-friendly five.
Yeah. So Jason and I lived together for a year at UT when we were in school 20 years ago now.
It was a long time ago, but it was still the best year of my life.
Yeah.
Except for the last many with my wife and children. But besides that, still the best year of my life.
21st best year of your life.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I was thinking about just a random story. So we shared a bedroom in a house where there was no closet. It wasn't a bedroom.
There was no
closet. There was a pool table in the room before we moved in. And so we had to put some of those white wire shelves just on a random wall. The
Correct.
Stuff you get at Lowe's or Home Depot.
Correct.
And
if I recall correctly, it was like you kind of walked in the door and wasn't it there on the left?
Yeah, and my bed was right there beside
Right, so you kind of, when you looked into the room, you're like, oh, this is a presentable room. Yeah. And then you kind of turned the corner and it was just all of our hot mess kind of up against the wall.
Yeah, but so how many times over the course of that year did that shelf
collapse,
fall out of the wall?
A lot.
I know it once for sure while we were asleep, and it woke us up because everything we owned fell to the floor.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah,
that was probably one of many bizarre, many bizarre events that happened that year.
So Jason is married to Carrie.
Yep.
And back then we never thought she would actually date you or much less marry you, but now it's been 20 years. And you have 3 kids, 3 boys.
Yeah, we got Hayden, Henley, and Hyatt.
Yep.
They're 13, 10, and 8, and so they're all about to have birthdays, so they'll be going 1 year above those 3 dates I just mentioned.
Yeah, Jason also went to Carson Newman for a year to play soccer, right?
Yes, did not play soccer, but I went to play soccer, had a change of coaches right in that transition, all that other stuff. But yes, went with that intent. That was kind of the thing that put my eye towards Carson Newman, plus beginning to explore ministry, then transferred back to the University of Tennessee and hung out with great folks like you.
Yeah, so now your boys, at least a couple of them are baseball guys, so we've rescued them out of the soccer soccer destiny.
2 of my boys play baseball, and my oldest son, when he first asked if he could play baseball, I literally said, and you were a baseball player, and I literally said, buddy, you don't want to do that. It's so boring.
Yeah.
And now I really, really enjoy it. I have an appreciation for baseball.
Yep. So Jason's pastor of Shoreline Church, which is an 8-year-old church in West Knoxville. You've probably seen it if you've ever driven up Pellissippi Parkway.
Yep.
And has an awesome ministry here. So as we went into this month, and really our pastors just kind of said, who are our friends around the region or even around the country who could speak to what it seems like God is doing on a little bit broader scale. You stepped up to the plate to go first for us, and we appreciate that. So
I hope that people will still stay tuned in for the next few weeks after having to endure this.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll go well.
Yeah, so the message from Wednesday night for our midweek online gathering was from John chapter 6. And so that's the story of Jesus walking on water, familiar story. And like a really helpful picture, I think, for us of just how God uses a storm. If we're talking metaphorically, then obviously there's the picture of the storm there on the water, but clearly, like, I've noticed, I'll just phrase the question like this. I've noticed a hesitancy maybe in some of us. Maybe it's a theological question, maybe we're uncomfortable with it, with a God who might do this, but the real hesitancy in us to say, hey, God is up to something. I loved your point that like if he governs the weather, and he's even designed the earth to work. You talked about how the wind comes down off the mountain. Like he must have intended when he made the world that a storm might hit that spot at some point in history, right? So why do you think there's such a hesitancy in us to say God is working through the circumstances of our day?
Well, when you actually look at the other accounts of Jesus walking on water in the Gospels, you see that indeed it wasn't that like they were just out there doing their thing and then Jesus shows up. Like Jesus actually put them out into the storm. Yeah. I mean, had told them to go out, and then then this is where the storm happens. Yeah. And so I think the natural question, as you said, is so wait a minute. So Jesus either authored or allowed this moment of like hardship and calamity in their life, and so then it naturally then begins to like tear down all of these maybe false understandings that we have of the gospel and who Jesus is. This is like somehow if we love him that never we're going to face hardship. Instead we're saying no, like Jesus actually is behind all of this. And I think as people look at COVID or they look at the circumstances that are going on in our day, they're like, surely, like this is just something that's happening, because if God was doing it, then we might interpret God as hateful. Like, why would a loving God do these things? And the thing that I always go back to is that what we often see as maybe unloving is actually the Lord like revealing maybe one of his greatest measures of grace to us. Like it is an invitation for us to experience him in remarkable ways. When Jesus sent them out into the storm, what did they get to experience? Sure, they experienced the storm. They also got to see that Jesus was bigger than the storm. Yeah,
it makes me think of, it says Matthew 4 and I think Luke 4, where Jesus goes out into the wilderness. This is the Spirit led Jesus out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Right. Like right before he goes out for 40 days of fasting, the Spirit drives him out there for the express purpose of putting him in the place where the enemy will have an opportunity to tempt him. Right. Knowing that what's coming on the backside of that is victory for Jesus.
Absolutely. And this intimacy that we would have never, ever experienced if it wasn't without hardship. I mean, we all know, like, when things are going easy, we have a tendency to lean in on our own strength, lean in on kind of our own abilities. But when things are clearly, like, out of hand, it's in that moment where we get to engage with the Father in really remarkable, intimate ways. I'm preaching right now at Shoreline. We're doing this series, and I was talking about where Jesus brings Lazarus back from the dead. Mm-hmm. And one of the cool parts of that story is that basically, Lazarus has been dead for a couple days, and they're basically, why didn't you come earlier? And Jesus actually says, like, I'm glad I didn't come earlier. Right, yeah. I'm glad I wasn't here for your good. Why? Because they needed to experience, like, the hardship of it. They needed to experience the grief and the suffering, because in the midst of that, they would also experience the freedom and this, like, renewing and this new life that he was about to bring.
Yeah. So we knew this month we wanted to talk about this remnant idea, but at the last minute I jammed back in the word happy, which is like, it's kind of laughable. It's sort of like the happy remnant, But like, that's the idea. Yeah. That's what we're after. When there's something that good to come on the other side, yeah, it stinks right now. Count it all joy whenever you encounter various trials from James 1. Like, yes, we're called to experience joy now in the midst of it, to trust God, but what's coming on the reason we're so, like, what's coming on the other side is happy. Like, it's a good, I just went falsetto there.
You did. Happy. I was about to say.
What's coming on the other side.
That was very impressive.
Happy. Like, it really is. It makes me think of discipline. Yeah. Of good father disciplines in the book of Hebrews. What God wants to do is bring us to this place of real joy with all the other things stripped away.
Yeah. Well, there's this, like, pureness There's also, as you've used the expression joy, I would just say there's a real peace that can be found in the midst of all of that. And yet, you're not going to get there without some of that difficulty.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's what we often deem as something as unloving is actually one of God's greatest expressions of love. He's inviting us in to a dependence upon him in the midst of hardship.
Yeah. So your point number one was the church sometimes minimizes struggles so God looks powerful. So there would be the temptation to kind of squash hard times.
Yeah.
Just almost to not give God a bad reputation. Right? Like God surely could have done something about this before now, so it really must not be that big a deal. And I keep saying and trying to remind myself, like, if we can't say this is a big deal,
yeah,
what are we waiting to say is a big deal?
Right.
Like, we should not be minimizing the pain of these days.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, so I you know my kind of earliest calls of ministry, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this story before, but I can remember, I think my first ever student camp that I did when I was doing student ministry forever ago. And I was laying in a bunk bed, I think the bottom level of a bunk bed at Covenant College, or maybe it's just a dorm bed, probably, excuse me. And it's like probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and I've got kids all across this campus, and I'm worn out and things of that sort. And I laid there, and I thought to myself, I hate this. Oh no, like, what? Oh no, am I not called to ministry? Because I am tired, I am worn out, I am frustrated with certain things. I would much rather be sleeping in my own bed. And it was just this like false understanding that somehow the ministry was just always like super fun and was always going to be just like this nonstop like youth group activity, you know, but like I began to see like, oh, it's really, really difficult. And I think the same is true, not so much related to ministry, but just the Christian faith. You know, that for a lot of us, we have, we're coming to grips with the idea that the Christian faith is intended to be difficult. It's intended to be countercultural. I mean, you are not, even outside of pandemics, you're not going to be able to stand for the things of the gospel in this day and age and not begin to sense some degree of opposition. Mm-hmm. And I always say to folks, if you are not facing opposition, it very well may be that you're not standing for the gospel. Yeah. And so, again, it is this unique season of life that we're in.
Yeah. Secondly, you noted that the storms usually they reveal more about us than God. They tell us more about us, really than what he's up to.
Yeah.
What do you like? So this is kind of an on the spot, play the part of a prophet kind of question for just a minute.
Do it.
Like, what do you see being revealed about us? You could speak personally.
Yeah,
or
that's great. Yeah, so what if you missed the message, you know, I just talked about, you know, sometimes we say, God, why are you doing this? That's our natural default. Why are you doing this? You know, and sometimes it's not this, you know, question full of malice. It's sometimes like legitimate, Lord, like just what are you doing?
Yeah, just give me a little more information.
Yeah, like I need to know. The problem is what that often does is it distracts us from questions like, where's my heart today? Yeah. It distracts us from questions like, what am I putting my hope in? And maybe also what should I be learning? And so I think to answer your question, you know, we've spent the last 7.5, 8 years doing a lot about, I would say, deconstruction and reconstruction of the gospel. Meaning, we spent a lot of time talking to our body and digging into the Word, talking about what is your understanding of who Jesus is, what's your understanding of the Christian faith, what is your understanding of like what does a walk with Christ look like? and deconstructing some things that had been added to culturally or societally or whatever it may be, deconstructing some of those things and then building it back, hopefully with a biblical framework. So the first 7 or 8 years talking about deconstruction and reconstruction of the gospel. I'm not 100% certain for Shoreline Church that it's not going to be a next season of deconstructing and reconstructing our understanding of the church. Of like, what is the church called to be? And, we as you guys walked into the building today, we're here on the Shoreline campus, and we have this big sign out in the lobby that says, "Be ready." That was our big theme for 2020, was going to be ready. And how funny that, like how little we really knew what that was. But I described it this way to a friend recently. I kind of felt like the Lord was indeed calling us to prepare for the next season. But it felt a bit like, in my mind, our role as kind of our role in the preparation was almost like, me, I love Disney. I don't know if that makes me a good Christian or a bad Christian, but I love Disney. And if you know the Magic Kingdom, every day they basically do this kind of like ribbon cutting, and the park is opened. And in my brain, like, readying was like, everyone get on your like Disney outfit and like be ready, and we're gonna cut the ribbon because the community is now knows about Shoreline Church, and we've got all these people moving into our area, and we're seeing people that have bought into the vision. And so it just felt a little bit like the readying was like, get ready to introduce everybody to this thing. And ultimately, I will tell you, like, I think what God's doing for us is the readying actually looks much more like we said from the very beginning, which we said we're going to be a hospital for the hurting. And I think the readying is like, go scrub in. Mm-hmm. Like we're about to engage with a whole bunch of people that are hurting in a whole bunch of ways. And we're going to have to do surgery. We're going to have to do triage. And obviously I'm talking about that in the spiritual sense. But it seems like the Lord is refining the church, moving us closer, maybe even in our ecclesiology, to something that he originally intended. Mm-hmm. That's just what my initial thoughts are.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm like some of those same thoughts, and then I start to think like, but we can't have conversation right now. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm like, but like, oh, so what are we supposed to do? Because we do want so badly to be ready in the moment where, like, it still feels like, if I'm honest, it still feels like the dam hasn't totally broken yet. You know, it feels like we're still all packing into that thing, like all slamming into the barrier, and like it's all gonna open up like a tidal wave one day. So readying ourselves in these days, because when we say the Happy Remnant, like we don't know how long this thing's gonna last. We can talk about the backside all we want to, but we're in the fight of it right now. What we want to do is be ready for what happens on the backside of it. I think,
just our temptation, especially for you and I as leaders, and you're similar to me in a lot of ways. You're a planner. Our temptation, when we even think about the expression a Happy Remnant, we have a tendency to focus on the remnant as opposed to that which has like kept us stable as the remnant. Mm-hmm. Like that which is the Father and his character, his kindness, his stability. We have a tendency, again, to keep thinking about us, to keep thinking about what we're going to do, how we're going to survive, as opposed to just continually fixing our eyes on the one that has sustained us so far and will sustain us in the future. I know that sounds maybe over spiritual and even a tad cliche, but it's a discipline I'm having to like dump back into my own heart and mind on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, that's what you're saying really at the end of the message, that to just stay aware of his voice in the midst of that. Any tips you have for that? Like, how do I in a time when, isn't it crazy that like at the time when we need to have a louder volume on the voice of God, the way society and technology and everything works now is, isn't it just like the enemy to be in total opposition to that? Absolutely. As loud as things can possibly be.
Everyone is on edge.
Yeah.
I mean, on edge in every way. My probably really oversimplified advice is to turn some things down and turn other things up. And so for me, about a year ago, I actually got off of Facebook. I got off Twitter. I've held on to Instagram because for the most part, it's pictures of people's dinners and their children. It's kind of that for the most part. Now we've got all this other messaging that's popping up in people's stories and things of that sort, and it's even beginning to kind of turn my stomach away from even Instagram. But I just could only take so many people's opinions.
Yeah.
And also sensed almost a burden, like a responsibility. If they knew that I was following and then they said what they said, which actually was an invitation to say, hey, I'm hurting, or I have something to say, or you need to listen, it just like put this burden on me that I couldn't keep up with. I've got hundreds upon hundreds of people that like I can't respond to all that. Like, we're going to have real civil conversations. We're going to have to, if you're upset about something, I'm going to need to talk to you about that.
Yeah, we're not even upset with you or the
Right,
church.
just
but
about
like,
anything.
Just about anything, because we care. Like,
Correct.
I care. If
Right.
you're thinking, this is what's all happening here, then I want to have a dialogue
Exactly.
around that. Yeah.
And so for me, it has been, I've had to bail on a lot of social media. I'm really particular about trying to see news through at least a balanced lens, and then so that's kind of how I'm turning certain things down, and then just turning things up is, man, I not only have to make a commitment to the Word, but for me personally, I have to have some accountability in the Word. And so I've got a couple guys that, like, they know, like, we're memorizing this text together, or we're studying it together. It's just really, it's got to be, some things got to quiet down, some other things got to raise up.
Yeah, it's good. We'll wrap it there. Thanks for taking time to have some dialogue and for serving our church in these ways. And
Oh man, it's my
grateful for
pleasure.
you.
God bless you guys.